Welcome, everybody, to Primer to Torah. My name is John Reed Austin. I'm a saxophone solo artist. I'm also a Hebrew roots instructor, and I also teach the signs of the heavens, and I call it biblical astronomy. I want to show you our logo for Primer to Torah and explain to you our ministry. The reason why I call it Primer to Torah is that it is a foundational type of teaching. Now you're thinking, well, if you're teaching biblical astronomy, that's way out there for me. How can you say that that's foundational, right? So, but really, when you look at what Genesis says in the very first verse of the Bible, it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens, then He created the earth, and then He put us on the earth." So if that doesn't sound foundational to you, well, then I recommend you continue to watch my broadcast and you'll see how God is using the heavens like a blueprint to show us the foundation of what He is about. And He's about redeeming the people of Israel, redeeming all of us if He can. So, well, I know He can, but of course, it's a choice. He gives us the choice to receive His salvation. So, and then the Torah teaches us how to walk out that salvation with fear and trembling. So, I want to also show you another logo that we have. It's called, this is our outreach ministry. Now, of course, I have a teaching ministry, but we also have a compassion for those who have been forgotten. So we remember the forgotten ones. We go to periodically Mexico and Guatemala, and I do live concerts there, and we give out toys and clothes and a bunch of other things. And we help those who are orphaned, whether they are young or old. And if you would like to participate in that, we are currently working on a building project. We had a fundraiser about a week ago, and it turned out really awesome. And so we're trying to finish this project in Juarez, Mexico. It's going to be our headquarters where children who are living on the streets get to come in for a meal and get the gospel message. So if you'd like to help out with that, go to our website. It's right there on the screen, Wine, Oil, Bread for Heart. Remember to put the number 4. All right. So now let's go ahead and continue where we left off last week in our teaching about the heavens. So if you haven't if this is your first time on Primer to Torah, you need to get the previous broadcast also. So we're on the slide here. You see that it says Pluto returns on February 22nd, 2022. There was an alignment of the Sun, Earth, and Pluto for the first time in 246 years. And so the last time this happened was on Independence Day. And that was a time of calamity and transformation. And that's exactly what Pluto really means. So I explained last week about how each planet can have a face. So God did this through Joseph, and the father and mother and the brothers. They all understood what he was talking about. He said, "The sun, the moon, and stars were bowing down to me." So they knew what he was talking about. They were able to interpret these dreams. So, and Joseph was also quite an interpreter of dreams too. So Pluto returns, and then we had a couple of things happen. A couple of days later, the Russian-Ukrainian war began. So we're seeing a transformation, some calamity, likened to the Revolutionary War that happened back in 246 years ago. This is a different kind of calamity, however. Now, hopefully a lot of you are getting ready for Passover. You've cleaned out your cupboards. So we just finally finished that today because we're actually going to be leaving for Indiana today. So right after this broadcast, we hit the road. We got to pack and go. And so pretty high winds out there. And so we are going to be there for Passover in Indiana. If Indiana is in your neck of the woods, I'd like to invite you to come to Messiah's New Life Tabernacle. You can Google the address. And I'm going to be doing a concert on the 16th. That's a Saturday at 7 p.m. And I'm going to be intertwining the 10 plagues with at least 10 songs that I'm going to be performing there. And we're just going to have a wonderful time worshiping the Lord. So you're invited to come. So But what's really interesting is that there are a lot of events going on in the heavens right now, and it just so happens there's a major event happening on that day, Saturday. And actually, it's Friday to Saturday. So, beginning at Shabbat, which is going to be the Pesach, it falls on a Shabbat this year. And it also is on Good Friday. So, you know what? If you don't celebrate Passover, you don't have any excuse to ignore it now because God just, He designed it so that it could happen today. So, or not today, but Friday. So, I want you to know that I want to wish you a Hag Sameach, which is, celebrating the Passover. So, Hag Sameach Pesach, and get your cupboards cleared. The reason why you do this spring cleaning is to help get the sin out, if you will. We have a lot of things in our life that seem really insignificant. And so we get our bifocals on and we're trying to read all the ingredients. And they're so small font. They're like probably 6 font, and you're trying to read it. Does it have yeast or leavening, or does it have, baking soda? And you're just trying to see, it's time consuming. But the thing is that when you're doing this unto the Lord, He rewards you. This is producing merit in your life, and you are causing a paradigm shift in your bloodline. So this weekend, there is going to be a major event. So we're going to be talking about that today. So you look at the 40-day markers there. God told me to start a 40-day marker on February 22nd. And it says February 2, but that's actually 2022. So there was the war started 2 days after that, and I started a 40-day marker. Well, the next 40-day marker was on a new moon or a dark moon. So there was dark moon on the 1st of April, and then on the 3rd was the new moon. It takes a couple of days before you can actually see the sliver of the moon. And for those of you, if you don't pay attention to the sliver of the moon, it's considered a holy day, just like a Shabbat. And you treat it like that, and you're supposed to hear the sound of the shofar. It announces the new month, right? And the next 40-day marker is still ahead of us. So we're going to be focusing on some things that are coming up. And the next time you see me, we're going to be looking in the rearview mirror to find out just what is happening. Because when it comes to biblical astronomy, this is not some kind of what do you call it, like a crystal ball. All right, we're not into date setting, we're into event watching. So we're watching for triggering events, and then when they happen, then we can put it on there just so that we know we're in tune with what God is doing, kind of like when you open up a morning newspaper. So we don't get into prophetic type thing. That means we're getting into astrology. And astrology is the language of the occult. So we're not going to try to predict stuff. I'm not trying to prophesy things, but there are some things that we know for sure that's going to happen. So I just put it out there. So for example, Israel's Independence Day is going to be in May during the next 40 days. And then there's going to be a blood moon. And it just goes on from there. All right, so now let's go to the next slide here. So we had the war that began with Ukraine and Russia. Next slide. And many people were asking if this is the Gog and Magog war, or will it possibly lead up to it. On April 1st, 2022, there was a parade of planets that occurred during a dark moon, immediately preceding the new moon of April 3rd. So when you're looking at Ezekiel 38, which talks about Gog and Magog, you have 3 Hebrew letters that spell out the word Gog. So go to the next slide, and you see Gog, Vav, Gog. Those are the Hebrew letters. And if we go to the next slide, you see that Gog, or the Gimel, which is the first and the last letter. So you have this sort of palindrome, okay? And you have 2 camels. That's what Gimel actually means, camel. Well, back in the day, before there was such a thing as a Russia, that whole area where Ukraine and Russia is right now, there was no such thing as camels up there. That's some tundra up there, So let's go to the next slide. So what we have here is we got, if you take the Gimel, the actual connotation of Gimel is a rich man. So I got two rich men here on either side, and they look pretty close to the same, and they both have an opinion. And in the middle of the two gimels, you have a vav, which represents man or a humble man, but it also represents nail or a hook. So I put a hook there. All right. And in Ezekiel 38, it says, I will turn you around and put hooks into your jaws. So go back to the next one. No, we're going to go forward, honey. My wife is my producer here, so we're trying to sync up everything. All right, so it says here, I will turn you around and put hooks into your jaws and lead you out with all your army, horses, horsemen, all splendidly clothed, a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Go to the next slide. All right, so this is what was going on in the heavens. And we have Venus and Pluto bookending Mars. Now, Mars, for quite some time here, actually ever since President Biden became president, I've been calling him the coronavirus planet, or not the coronavirus, but I call him the COVID, or we'll call it the flu bug or the snake bite. All right, so Pluto is Putin, and then on the left side is Venus, which used to represent Benjamin Netanyahu, but he got ousted by the government. And so now this belongs to Vladimir Zelensky. Now notice you got two Vladimirs. You got a Vladimir and a Volodymyr. And they're both the same, it's just spelled different. So remember, you got two men with two opinions. And there's one in the middle. The man in the middle, he's stuck between the two of them, and he's trying to play both sides. And there's a lot of hanky-panky that's going on behind the scenes that's not getting put on the news. All right, so on the left of those planets there, you have Saturn, and it's eclipsing two stars. And one is called Nashra. Nashra means bringer of good news. So go to the next slide so you can see that. And there you go. So so you have, well, it's covered up by one old bread for heart, but that's okay. So, but you see Nashra there. It's covered by Saturn. Saturn's called the evil planet. All right, so now go forward to the next slide. So there you have the two Vladimirs. There are two camels or two rich men. See, back in the day, a person who was a rich man had a camel. It's kind of like Solomon. He was he had everything. So he had apes and peacocks. Well, here, in ancient Hebrew, a camel represented a rich man. So you got these two rich guys going at it with each other, and we got Biden stuck in the middle, and he's not too happy about it. He's trying to show a good face, if you will. All right, let's go to the next slide. So once again, you have Mars in the middle, Venus on the left, and Pluto on the right with two stars. Now, why is that important? Because you got two stars. Well, the good news is something that's being hidden from us, see? So something, I would say that Biden has something to hide, or even Hunter Biden. What is it that he's trying to hide? Well, that's why my broadcast today is called The Big Reveal, and I'm going to show you. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, once again, here you have Mars in the middle, and you got the two Vladimirs. So you got Putin, Pluto, and you got Venus for Vladimir or Volodymyr. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, now there's another system to the left of Getty or Capricorn. Getty means sea goat. And this is Delhi, the waterman, also known as Aquarius. And you see Mercury right there in the water. So there's an outpouring, a message of some kind of an outpouring. Could it be some incredible news that is about to be revealed? Now you look at Jupiter representing Donald Trump still. When he was president, he was considered like a Cyrus, a King Cyrus. A righteous king can be represented by Jupiter. So he was doing a lot of great things for Israel. He proclaimed Jerusalem as the capital. He helped move the embassy to Israel, to Jerusalem, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And then the third thing he did before he left office was the Abraham Accord. Now, you see a planet next to that and it's called Neptune. In Hebrew, it's Rahav. Think of like Rahab, but it's actually pronounced Rahav. So Rahav actually means big, or in the words of Donald Trump, huge. He says, "I got some huge news." You know, he's the one that's carrying the message. Well, you're going to see something very interesting in another slide coming up here. So let's move forward to the next slide. So that was during the time of Purim. Let's go to the next slide. And so let's look one more time here. This is the whole. These are two constellations put together. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now, this is where the moon was at the time. It was during Purim, March 17th. I call it Ariel, which is Hebrew for lion. And the moon is at its fullness right there in the feet of the lion. And the lion represents the tribe of Judah. All right, now let's move forward to the next one. Okay, so we've been showing you 7 different 40-day marker conglomerations. And this was the 7th one. And so we're back again. So you see all the different events that went on in the first 40-day markers. And now we're in the second 40-day marker. So we're in Passover week, and we're waiting for this big reveal that's going to happen. So let's move forward to the next slide. One other thing that happened on March 29th. Next slide, please. Whoops, let's go back. I didn't put it in there. All right, so on the 29th of March, we had a solar flare. Now you can go to the next slide. So you see it down there, March 29th was a solar flare, but this was not just an ordinary solar flare. There were 17 of them in the same spot. They call it CME, or coronal mass ejection. And when I saw the news about this in my news feed, that it happened 17 times, I thought, well, that's unusual. I wonder if it means something. Maybe God's telling us something. Well, it just so happened it was 17 days before Passover, because it's April 15th when Passover arrives, and you do the math. Let's go to the next slide. So there you have 17 flares, 17 days, April 15th, Passover. Next slide, please. We had an event on April 1st. That was the new moon. Now you have Mars bunching up with Saturn there, right? And Shetty and Nashua are still completely blocked out. And you have Venus to the left. So there is, but there, look at Pluto way over beyond. It's still in the house of Getty, the sea goat, but he seems a little isolated, doesn't he? All right, so Putin has been isolated from the rest of the world. They're putting sanctions on him, and they're trying to shake him. And let's go to the next slide. All right, and look at this now. You see Aquarius, right? The waterman. Okay, I call him Delhi. Jupiter, Donald Trump. He's been trying to tell Putin to try to do a little tattletale about Hunter Biden. And he's got something in his pocket, his back pocket, he wants to reveal. Who knows? Maybe it's a Trump card. I don't know. But something that's about ready to be revealed. So this was what got my attention. And look at Mercury. Mercury is now being eclipsed by the sun. So there's a message that's being hidden by the nations. So the nations are in on this too. Let's go to the next slide. All right. So there, once again, you have Pluto. You have Shetty and Nashua. Nashua means the bringer of good news. There's also an Arabic name for Shetty. It's Deneb. So Shetty is actually, it just means tail of the goat. It is a Hebrew name. All right, next slide. Now this is on Passover. This is what we're going to see this coming Friday. So in just a couple of days, do you notice something about Jupiter? Neptune's gone. It's totally hidden. All right, and there's Venus now. Instead of Mercury, you have Venus is now in the water area, and Mercury has gone. So the messenger is further off. And you have Mars there, and then Saturn. So they're all entering into the house of Delhi now. All right, move forward to the next slide. Oh, there's Mercury right there. It's in the hind feet of, or not hind feet, but the forefeet, front feet of Tela. Tela is Hebrew for lamb. I call it lamb instead of ram because this is the time when we eat lamb. This is the time of the lamb sacrifice. Now, how anybody can know when Passover is, you've got to see the sun in the house of Tela. And you see the sun there. And there's Uranus, which means little light in Hebrew. I can't, the name escapes me for just a moment, but it's Ura. Ura, like light. Okay, so Ura means light, but it's little light. All right, so now we're coming up to Passover. Go to the next slide, please. So I hope you guys are getting ready, because it's going to be an amazing event. And like I said, I'm going to be doing a concert, so I hope you can come. Let's go to the next slide again. All right, so one more time, I wanted to show you the parade of planets is what I call it. So matter of fact, if you can actually go out tomorrow morning just before sunrise, and you'll see this alignment of planets. And you're also going to be able to see the moon, I believe. All right, next slide. There's the moon. That was March 17th, but there's going to be a full moon for Passover. All right, next slide. So you look at the second 40-day marker at the new moon and Passover week. So we're in great anticipation. I'm going to be watching the heavens, see what happens. Watch the news feeds. On the next slide. Just a little sidebar here. This several years ago, something came in my news feed that there was going to be two stars. The astronomers said two stars were going to collide on the 15th of May. And if you go to the next slide, actually, yeah, you can stay there. That's fine. But there was they said that they got their calculations wrong. Would have been interesting if there were two. They said that you would be able to see it in the night sky. But what was more fascinating is that it just so happens to be the commemoration of the Arab-Israeli War. And remember in 1947-48 when they became a nation state. So, all right, this slide here is one of the eclipses we had February 26th. It was in 1979. Many of you that are watching right now, maybe you don't even remember what you were doing on that day. But I put on here that if you were to count how many years from 1979 to 2017, it's a total of 38 years. Why is that significant? Because this is actually a harbinger that in 17 years, or not 17 years, but in 2017, in 38 years, there would be an announcement in the heavens that we were coming to the end of the age. So 120 jubilees. We are now in the 120th jubilee, and that it would begin the end of the exile. So 38, the number 38 in Gematria represents the end of exile. Why? Because we know that 40 is the number for testing. And so you remember that the children of Israel, when they left Egypt, there was about 2 years that passed, and they were supposed to go into the land of promise and give an account of how they were going to have to take the land. But they gave a bad report. You remember that? There were the 10 spies, and there was 2 that gave a good report. That was Joshua and Caleb, or Caleb, I guess it's really the Hebrew pronunciation. So therefore, they had to stay in the wilderness for 38 more years. So at the end of their exile, they got to go to the promised land. So it was on the 50th Jubilee. Now, where do I get this? Let's go to the next slide. When they crossed the Jordan, it was on the 50th Jubilee. Noah, he had an ark built, and it was on the 27th Jubilee. There's a book called the Book of Jubilees, and you can find that that account. It goes from Adam all the way to Joshua. Let's go to the next slide. Right, so we're coming up to 3 solar eclipses. We've already seen the first one, which was in 2017, but if you take all 3 of the these eclipses, 2017. There's going to be one in 2023 that's going to go right through 4 corners. And then the last one's going to come up 2024, and it's going to form an Aleph. Now, if you go to the next slide, if you take 2017 and 2024 and leave out 2023, it forms a Tav. So what I believe this is telling me here is that the one in 2023 is a harbinger to prepare. Kind of like when Esther, she was doing her beauty preparations for 6 months. So we got this period of 177 days between 2023 and 2024 when the two eclipses take place. And they're both going to be total eclipses. The one in 2023 is actually going to be an annular solar eclipse. So it's not going to be safe to look at directly, but the one in 2024 is going to last for over 4 minutes in totality. That means you'll actually be able to look at the eclipse without harming your retina in your eye. Let's go to the next slide. Now, it's very significant when you look at the X there, the very epicenter of where the last eclipse is going to cross is in a place called Cairo, Illinois. Now, when you think of end of exile, you think of Israel coming out of Egypt, right? So here we have Little Egypt. They call it Little Egypt for several reasons. What I recommend to do for sake of time is all you need to do is just look up Cairo, Illinois, Little Egypt, and you can read a little history about, there was slavery there. They were one of the last to come out of slavery. They had a crop failure, and part of Illinois actually helped them get out of their impoverished state of famine. Let's go to the next slide. Now, here's where the next solar eclipse is going to be. Where are you going to be? Well, watch this. So we have let's go to the next slide. Here is the one that happened previously. You see how it swooped across the United States from Oregon, which is the 33rd state of the Union, and it exited out of South Carolina, which is the 33rd parallel. Did you know that Israel sits on the 33rd parallel? Okay, if I don't get your attention yet, then I'm going to get your attention here in a moment. But if we flip back, or we stay right there, it says 7 Salems, which is an Arabic version of shalom. But the Bible, translators, when they translated our Bible, there was 4 times in Scripture where they used the word Salem or Salem, and it represents peace. But the problem here is that there's darkness that went over 7 cities across from Oregon to South Carolina. And so it was like a shadow that went over peace. And we saw a lot of stuff with Antifa, Black Lives Matter, all this stuff that was going on with Trump and impeachment, and it was a mess. Let's go to the next slide. So follow me, honey. If we start, here's the 7 Salems: Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Nebraska, Missouri, Kentucky, South Carolina. Now, if that doesn't get you, look at that, the next slide. You have 7 Salems that go up in the next eclipse: Texas, Arkansas, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Maine. Fascinating, isn't it? You just can't make this stuff up. All right, so let's go to the, let's do a little more close-up. Go ahead and go forward about 6 slides, honey. So there's the different Salems. Now to the next one. Now this is a more close-up one, so follow me. This is the Texas one, near Austin. Here's one in Arkansas, in the next slide. And the next slide is Illinois, right by Carbondale. Then the next one is in Indiana. That's right close to Louisville, Kentucky. And you see the red, that's the totality, right? And then we got Ohio, the next one, and then Pennsylvania, and then you got Maine. All right, now let's go to that's the slide right there. So this represents the 7 years of plenty. And you see we had 3, you see we had the eclipse in 2017, and then we had what was called the Revelation 12 sign. You see that way on the bottom there. You have Israel, represented by Virgo or Bethula, and Leo, Ariel, the lion. So you have the lion of the tribe of Judah, and those who were scattered to the nations, that's Israel. They were called Ephraim. They were the 10 lost tribes. So God's getting ready to reunite these 2 houses. So then there's the 3 blood moons, and you had 3 failed elections in Israel. So the 3 blood moons were the 3 failed elections. And then you had snake bite right there in April, and you had Passover. So I called this the Passover plague sign. So Bethula is always a major player in prophetic events. So you have, we got to see the moon rise on that. It was a full pink moon. And so the pink moon is always during the time of Passover. All right, so now we have the last 3.5 years. We got June 10th, there was an eclipse. And there was October 14. That's going to be the next eclipse, the one that I called the Harbinger one that comes 177 days before April 8, 2024. And let's go to the next slide. This is what we're going to see. I believe there's going to be a major outpouring. So Delhi, you see the waterman has Mars covering up the evil planet, the Satan planet. So it's now we don't know for sure if that's going to be Biden at that time, or it might be somebody else, or maybe nobody at all. Maybe there'll be another virus, a snake bite or something. We don't know. So we watch for events. Remember, we don't date set. We watch for events, but there may be some kind of a major outpouring, right? Then you have Venus over there in Dagim, which means fish. You have Mercury in the center there, where the band that ties the two fish together. So the Mercury and the moon, you can't see them because they're blotted out by the sun. And then Jupiter is over there near Tela, the lamb. Now, what's really interesting, it's right in between Tela and Shur, the bull, also known as Taurus. And so there's like this giant menorah in the sky. And we're going to be able to see this in its totality. It's going to be fascinating. But what's significant about Jupiter here, we need to be watching this because when Donald Trump was born, it was a blood moon. And now we're going to have an eclipse this time. And Jupiter was in the horns of the bull. So it represents great determination. So he's been a man of great determination, would you say? Whether you like him or not, he's a determined man. We don't know if he's going to be running again. That's not what I'm trying to predict or anything like that. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so you have the Aleph, which is the three eclipses put together. And you have the epicenter. Go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. There's Cairo, called Little Egypt in Illinois. Now, these little truckers here, this is why, let's go back to the previous screen. This is why I think this is, telling us something. Is there going to be an outpouring? There's a lot of people that are coming into the teaching and instruction of God called the Torah, and they're looking for answers. Remember how these truckers got really inspired and they started blocking roads off and stuff? Could it be sort of a harbinger of what's to come? Look at the next slide. Watch this. So you see they're all coming in four directions. Let's go to the next slide. And there's Cairo, Illinois, right there in the middle. Next slide. So could this be the end of the exile? Next slide. And remember, I told you that Joshua, he crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land in the 50th Jubilee. Now, let me show you something here. This next slide. So here are four major events. Now, a lot of people are thinking, well, John Reed Austin, how do you know that 2017 was the 120th Jubilee? Well, what I did is I took the 120th Jubilee, I counted backwards, and I every 50 years, and I came to 333 before Common Era. And you can go to Wikipedia, and it'll tell you that on that date, Alexander the Great fought the Battle of Issus against Darius III and won. And it was the 70th Jubilee. 70 is a very prophetic number. And then I counted backwards 20 more Jubilees. We come to about 1406 before Common Era. That is what a lot of biblical chronologists guess, that it was about the year that Joshua crossed the Jordan. And we know, according to the book of Jubilees, that the 27th Jubilee was when Noah crossed over, or not crossed over, but he built the ark. So we have these four dates together. This took about an hour for me to put together, but really fascinating. All right, so we know, I'm convinced that 2017 was the Jubilee year. Now, if we had a Jubilee year in 2017, then we should have had a Shemitah before that. Let's go to the next slide. So if that's the case, then the next Jubilee, not Jubilee, but Shemitah year, so you count 7 and you do it 7 times, that's 49 years. Then the next year is another rest year called Jubilee. So these 7 years will end in 2024. Those are the years of prosperity. You know, we've had some very prosperous years in our economy when Donald Trump was in office, whether you like him or not. We had some good times. Now things have changed. And, you know, we feel it every time we go to the gas pump. So we're approaching kind of like a roller coaster on a deep dive. You know, the economy is going, you know, into the tank. And we're feeling the fear. You know, some people are. I'm not saying me. But we haven't reached the bottom yet. So everything in life has an ascent and a descent. And that's why a lot of people are confused about whether this is a Shemitah year, because it's the investors that are doing this. And guess who else is following this? Yeah, the Rabbinical Council in Israel. They're deciding, you know, when they're going to have a 13th month, and it throws off the calendar by a whole month. And then we're celebrating Feast of Tabernacles and Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah a month too early, Passover too early. This year, everything's back in sync. So, but at the end of the 7 years, we should probably see some huge situations with our economy reaching to the bottom. But what goes down must come up. It's kind of like gravity, but only in the opposite. Let's go to the next screen. All right. I want you to know that I have a new CD coming out, and these are some of the songs that are going to be on that CD. We were just at the studio last night trying to finish up the mastering phase, and we're real excited about this, and it's called Awaken the Fire. Now, this is the reverse side. I don't have the picture of the front, but basically, these are hymns. We're restoring the hymns of the faith that has made America great. And many of the people, the youth, don't remember these hymns, don't know them, because they're not sung in church anymore. Everything's gone, you know, to PowerPoints and stuff, and we're in this millennial generation, and we're hearing all these contemporary sounds and everything. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that everything has changed. Nobody wants to open a hymnal anymore. Nobody brings Bibles to church anymore either. Everything's on a cell phone or an iPad or a laptop, and so everything's digitalized. So we don't, I bet you that my daughter, who's in school right now, a Baptist school, and I bet you she can beat anybody who at finding a scripture with a Bible versus looking it up in a cell phone. Because she's good at it. So remember those days? I don't know. Some of you are older like me. You remember the days and we'd be in Sunday school and we'd have a little kamikaze or whatever you call it, and they'd name a scripture, and you're trying to get in there and you got it. You stand up and you start reading it and you get a score. Your team gets a point, but you don't see that anymore. Nobody bothers to crack open their Bible anymore. So that's what the purpose of this CD is about, is just restore the love of the hymns. So if you'd like to get some pre-order, you can go to our wineoilbreadforheart.org. Honey, if you can go back to the original PowerPoint up at the top there and show that again to everybody. And so we have a lot of other product also. If you'd like to get more information about what I've been teaching here on the heavens, I have a thing called The Heavens Declare, looking to the skies through Hebrew eyes. And it gives you the correct order of the Mazarot, which I prefer to call instead of astronomy or celestial signs, things like that. But the Mazarot is the signs of the heavens. It's not zodiac. It's not astrology. It's not getting into horoscope or anything like that. I do expose the lies of that kind of stuff. I also go into things about the 12 tribes of Israel and how they correspond to the 12 signs of the Mazarot, and also the feast days of God. I also talk about the birth of the Messiah. Have you ever wondered when he was born? I can show you what it was like in the heavens when it happened. I can show you what it was like in the heavens when Abraham was about to kill his son Isaac, and there's a lot of other things. I can show you the sign of Joseph. The sign of Joseph happened just around, I think it was 2016. No, not quite that. I think it was like 2009. That's right, 2009. I go into that. We are living in the days of Joseph, and that's why I talked about the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. So we got 2 years. We got 2 years. Where are you going to be? How are you going to prepare? So we need to know and be prepared about, where are we going to get our food? Is there going to be a famine in the land, or are we going to make our trek back to Israel? I believe that right now what's happening is that the Jewish people of Israel are going to open up their doors to us, those who are scattered to the nations, and they're going to make it away, because it's going to be. I'm just going to be up front here. It ain't going to be pretty here, folks, living here in America if it continues like this. And God is going to be watching over us. He wants us to experience his salvation again. It's going to be called the Greater Exodus. In fact, one day people are going to say, you mean to tell me that you went through the Greater Exodus? And, so it'll be the age-old story, it'll be like a rewriting of history. So I don't know, how are you doing on time, honey? 15 minutes. Do we have anybody that has a question? If you'd like to chime in on our chat, I welcome you, and I'd be happy to answer some questions. So let me just refer. So if anybody comes up, just let me know, honey. Okay. And we're going to be heading for Indiana right after this broadcast. And so it's about a 17-hour drive. So we're not going to go all the way through. And I'm hoping the wind is going to die down, and we're going to probably spend some time maybe at the border of Iowa and Nebraska, somewhere around there. And then the next morning, it's going to be an all-day drive. And do we have a question?
No, I just wanted to know, what the title of this message was, what's going to be revealed, right?
Yes. So this Friday, the heavens are going to be all spread out, and there's going to be a total eclipse of Rahav, which is Neptune. Neptune means big. So there's something big, I believe, that's going to be revealed. So we need to be watching what's going on in the news. Does it have anything to do with Putin and Zelensky? We don't know.
It has to do with Israel.
But we know that there's a lot of things going on in Israel right now. There's been a lot of there's a chance that they may have a government collapse. There's a lady that's actually part of the Knesset, and she has been threatening from time to time that if you don't take care of these refugees, that I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna resign. And all it takes is one person. That's how fragile this government is right now. So the very first 3 government elections, they failed. Why? Because if you win an election, you still have to get a unity of at least 61 seats to have a majority. So there's 120 seats. And unfortunately, they had to have another election and a third election. And that was unprecedented. They never had that many elections before. And the reason why the government continued after that was because of the snake bite. So everybody went into lockdown, and finally the president of Israel said to Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, the current prime minister at that time, and he told Benny Gantz, he says, hey, look, let's just have a shared government for 18 months. And so you get the first half and you get the second half, because you're the one that had the most votes. So Benjamin Netanyahu continued on, but there was a lot of issues that were going on. For example, we had a lot of accusations that took Benjamin Netanyahu to trial, and so he became an embattled prime minister, and it didn't look good, because then in December of 2020, there was a collapse of government because they were supposed to come up with a budget. And if they didn't come up with a budget, then they would be forced to have another election. So they had a fourth election. And then that election resulted in Benjamin Netanyahu having the majority of percentage of votes, but he could not get a government of 61 seats. In fact, they had enough in the majority to actually oust him. So they basically voted him out. And the funny thing is that these were so many factions of government that they hardly agree on anything. They just agreed on one thing, and that was we must get rid of him because he's been in government for 12 years, and that's long enough. In fact, he was the longest since the Hasmonean dynasty to be in office. So that ended him. And Trump was also ousted too. And I kind of had a feeling, I didn't want to predict anything. I had a feeling that, their handwriting was on the wall, that it was going to be the end of the road for both of these guys. So, because a lot of times what happens in Israel is what happens in America. So, I want you to be watching for Friday. And, when you're celebrating the Sabbath and the Passover, I want you to think about Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. There's a lot of terrorist attacks that are going on right now. People are being shot at, and it's basically persecution without a cause. And they're just going out there to raise a lot of havoc, and a lot of it's because this is that time of year. So they're celebrating Ramadan too. The Muslims are celebrating Ramadan. So that started about a week ago, and so that goes on for a whole month. So there's a lot of turmoil going on there. There's a spirit of death that's coming over during this time of Passover. And you remember during Passover, the reason why there's a Passover is because they had to put the blood on the doorposts. And anybody who was in that house that had the letter Chet written over there, that it represented that the angel could not go in there because there was life. And so it had to move on. But anybody that didn't have the blood on the doorposts, their life was taken. It was the firstborn, the death of the firstborn. And this has never happened before and since then in history. We have never seen where everybody that died was the firstborn. And this includes even the cattle. So it's astounding how they happen. Now, a lot of scientists are trying to speculate, well, how is that possible? We don't need to, God is the God of impossible, right? So we don't need to understand how God works. We just need to obey his instruction. And he says, I want you to keep the Shabbat. I want you to keep the Passover for eternal generations. It's a perpetual order. And in fact, when you're doing the Seder, it means order. So when you're doing the Seder, you're producing merit for your future generations. And you're always one generation away from actually coming out of the teaching and instruction of God, going into exile. We don't need to go in an exile again. I'm hearing reports that people are thinking about going back to Egypt. That's figurative, okay? No, we need to continue to walk the walk of faith. What is the faith? Faith is the teaching and instruction of God, being obedient to it. The most important commandment is to hear and obey. Because if you don't hear and obey, hear, O Israel, Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. If you are not going to be able to hear and obey what God tells you to do, then what will happen is that you will not love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. So you're thinking about the fourth commandment, which is keeping the Shabbat. That's likened to a ring on your hand. The fourth finger is your wedding ring, right? So this is a sign of the covenant that you have with God. He is your husband, and you're married to him. And this is a way of having a power date. Hey, this is like a Super Bowl. You're having a wonderful date, like an anniversary with him. This is the time when we remember the New Year's. This is a time of celebrating our liberation. And so if there's an Egypt in your life, You know, you've got unwise associations you need to put aside. Maybe you have, you know, you're experiencing dust, which is like lice. And you may think, well, you know, dust is, I can't even see dust. Well, God can see dust. He can see everything. And he can see the most insignificant things in your life. And you need to take care of those little crumbs, those little specks of dust. That's why you clean out your cupboards and you start thinking about, you know, God, I'm doing my best to love you with all my heart, mind, soul, and strength. And I want to be ready to hear your voice. And then you're going to look up in the heavens because your redemption draws nigh. And so he's causing things to happen in the heavens now to let you know that he's about ready to, you know, wrap it up. And he's going to bring in his kingdom here on this earth. And he's got an inheritance waiting for us, like a wedding ring. It's your heritage. It's your passport, if you will. And you're going to go to the land of Israel. He's going to give you your inheritance. And we're going to dwell with him and set up his kingdom here on earth. Yes, that's right. I'll tell you what, some people will try to tell me, well, what if the angels come to rapture you? I said, well, I'm going to kick them away. I'm going to say, get away from me, man. I got some evangelism to do here. This is going to be one of the greatest times on earth because we're going to bring the houses back together again. We're going to bring Leo, the tribe of Judah, or Ariel, and we're bringing Bethulah, Virgo, the sign of Israel, bringing the two houses back together again. And we're going to get out of our exile. So these next 2 years, you want to be totally just prepared for God's voice to be spoken to you and how he's going to lead you. Is he going to come to fish you out, to hunt you out and bring you to the land? Maybe you want to stay here. Maybe you love this land. That's okay. You don't have to go. But God has a purpose for you, and he has a plan, and it's written in the blueprint of the heavens. All right, so
Psalm 8.
Psalm 8. Did somebody post a Psalm 8?
No, the guy says that he puts his wonder in the heaven.
That's right. Well, that's yeah. Let's look at Psalm 8. Let's pull that up.
Because this is what's going to happen on Friday.
Yep, he's going to be displaying in the heavens a message. And God can speak to you if you want to look up in the heavens this week. So let's look up Psalm 8. I like the New King James Version. And it says here, O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth, who have set your glory above the heavens. Out of the mouth of babes and nursing infants, you have ordained strength because of your enemies, that you may silence the enemy and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him? And the Son of Man that you visit him. So God's getting ready to visit you for Passover. He's going to meet you. He's going to cause you to be sovereign because you're doing what is called it's a appointed time. He has an appointment for you, and it's up to you to keep that appointment. So what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? For you have made him a little lower than the angels. Now, did you know angels in other translations is messengers? Did you know that the signs of the heavens are messengers? Did you know the planets are messengers? We don't see them moving because they're billions and billions and billions of miles away. Kind of like when you look at a plane going across the sky, you can't, it's going like 500 miles an hour, but to you, it looks like it's just like an ant in the sky. So if you imagine that if you're looking at messengers in heaven and they're not moving, well, they really are moving. You're seeing the past. That's what it looked like 16 billion years ago. And so, but God had created the heavens first, and he ordered them, even the comets and asteroids and meteors. He says, I'm going to make you only go this far. It says, but you got to rotate around that point, and you Comet, you're going to come over here, and you're going to stay in this asteroid belt for a while. So he ordains all of these messengers because he wants to proclaim a sign. Continue on. It says, you have made him to have dominion over the works of your hands. You have put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, even the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the fish of the sea, that pass through the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth. So when I think of the word name, I think of the Hebrew name is Hashem, the name. It actually means lifestyle. So is your lifestyle lined up with the appointed times of God? Well, this is your opportunity, because you really don't have an excuse this year, folks, because it's going to be on Good Friday this year. So you have a good excuse to maybe do it right. And he's actually, I remember a couple of years ago, during the snake bite, when we were all in lockdown, we had no excuse not to keep the Passover because we were all in our homes. We couldn't go anywhere. Couldn't go to church. Remember that? And, and of course, Easter didn't happen. So I'm hoping that you will continue with me next week, and we're going to look in the rearview mirror what happens this Friday, okay? So don't miss the next one. I'm really excited. Well, my name is John Reed Austin. Be sure to visit our website, Wine, Oil, Bread, 4, Heart. Check out our product. You give a donation to our ministry to help the forgotten ones. We'll see you next time. Make sure you like and subscribe.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hugie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.